November 9th, and the recommendation is to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second. Any errors, omissions, or comments on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item, item 2, is our first of 2 delegations. I'd like to invite Mr. Sebastien Anderson to come forward, and he's here to speak on the approval of variance to bylaw permitting trucks along Pipeline Road. There is a PowerPoint presentation, so if you just give me 1 second to cue that up.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Just to let you know that we have a 5-minute time period for your presentation, and if you look in front of you, you'll see a green, yellow, and red light there. That'll be started, so you'll know when you're getting to the end of your time, your 5 minutes. Then we'll have, if there's any questions, we will do that after.
And I understand we can request an additional 5 minutes if that's possible, or?
I don't, because we've got a tight agenda. We only got an hour normally for this committee today, so.
I understand that.
So we'll let you start, and if you can just keep it condensed, and we'll get to it. Okay?
Thank you very much. My name is Sebastien Anderson. I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the Pipeline Road Residents Association, which is an unincorporated association of residents who own properties along Pipeline Road and David Avenue. We've been before council on other variance applications, albeit not for a few years. We met at the public consultation meeting, if that's what you want to call it, and stemming from that, the group asked me if I would make this presentation to the committee.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm here. And I want to start off by saying that the position of the Pipeline Residents Association is this, that no variance to bylaw 3574 Section 26 and Schedule A should be approved to permit nighttime hauling along David Avenue and the Pipeline Road corridor, period. There are other viable alternatives that we'll talk about that are available to provide aggregate to the Port Mann Bridge expansion project. And by that, we want to be clear, we're not talking about negotiating the number of loads, the number of days. The bylaw says no nighttime hauling, and we're asking council to stick by the bylaw. And I just want to review some of the background. The Pipeline Road Residents Association say no to the variance for the following reasons. The city approved this area as a residential zoning along each side of Pipeline Road and David Avenue. In that regard, the city enacted bylaw 3574 to restrict truck traffic to designated times, those being from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, with no truck travel on Sundays or statutory holidays. The residents who purchased properties along David Avenue and Pipeline Road relied upon the city's representations that these areas were zoned for residential housing, that is to say they were not zoned as either commercial or industrial properties. The city, the residents also relied on the representation that the city would abide by and enforce Section 26, Schedule A of the bylaw and its predecessors. It's wrong now for the city to impose unilaterally upon the residents the burdens of a variance of the bylaw. Those burdens include loss of property value and decreased ability to sell their homes, and therefore decreased mobility, because the city finds the bylaw inconvenient to business. The loss of quiet enjoyment of their properties and the deprivation of sleep outside the designated times in the bylaw for a period of 36 months is untenable. We find these intrusions to be both substantial and serious. Now, we don't base this submission on anecdotal evidence. We rely, for example, on statistics provided by the World Health Organization with respect to the damages that noise can cause. One is hearing impairment, the second is interference with communications, the third is disturbance of sleep, the next is noise has been found to be a cause of cardiovascular and psychophysiological effects. It reduces performance, and it provokes annoyance responses and changes in social behavior. In fact, the World Health Organization publicizes a fact sheet on community noise. These are the levels, according to the World Health Organization, at which noise impairs variance activities. You'll notice industrial, commercial, and traffic areas, hearing impairment is noted at the 70 decibel level in a 24-hour period. Sleep disturbance is as low as 30 decibels over an 8-hour period. As recently noted in Suzuki Monroe, a case decided by Justice Verhoeven, the City of Coquitlam's noise bylaw is general, vague, and I quote, contains no objective standards. The City of Coquitlam's noise bylaw merely prohibits noise. Noise is defined in the bylaws, including any loud outcry, clamor, shouting, movement, or any sound that is loud or harsh or undesirable. We'd note that the variance to the bylaw varies the traffic bylaw, but does not vary the noise bylaw.
Okay, you're towards the end of your 5 minutes, so I'll give you some more time to just hurry to your conclusion. I'll give you a few more minutes.
Thank you. Other municipalities in BC regulate noise in quiet residential areas. For example, in Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond, and Port Moody, the daytime level is set at 55. Nighttime is at 45. We say that Council abrogated to Kiewit the City's responsibility to make noise measurements before approving the bylaw. In addition, we say that there was no meaningful public consultation before the bylaw was approved. And relegating the public consultation process to Kiewit to carry out, we say is improper. If all the City provides is this 5-minute consultation period before the committee, we say that's not meaningful consultation. Approval of the 1-week trial period was unanimously approved by Council, we say, without any public consultation. In fact, the Mayor is quoted as saying during the Council meeting that just because some residents complain doesn't mean that Council will change its decision. Kiewit's after-the-fact public consultation meeting was held at the same time as the Council meeting, so in fact the decision makers of Council could not attend the public consultation meeting and hear the concerns of the residents. Council has previously made commitments to the Pipeline Road Residents Association to advise in advance of variance applications. That was not followed in this case. Since that time, there has been approval of another variance, this time for Seawee, without any public consultation. Those hauling periods are going to take place from November 24th through December 1st. The City of Coquitlam, we say, has a dismal track record of regulating daytime hauling. There's been no enforcement for moving infractions by bylaw and RCMP, who pass the buck and responsibility between each other, saying they don't know who's got responsibility for enforcing the bylaw. Hauling commences on a daily basis before the posted truck hours without any regulation by the City. The City has not delivered on previous promises to conduct noise measurements, which to date have not been conducted. The City, in addition, Jacob engine brakes continue to be used regularly. As I prepared this PowerPoint presentation this morning, I counted 6 instances.
Okay, we're about 3 minutes past.
Okay. I'm just about finished.
Okay.
There's inconsistent use of tarps to cover loads. Truck speeds have been measured at over 100 kilometers an hour. Roads are not repaired, and we use, for example, Pipeline and Galette. In fact, public safety is also a concern. Don McGill, the president of the Teamsters Local, has addressed this recently, saying that at the low contract rates proposed by Kiewit, that maintenance is a place where costs can be cut, and that raises safety issues. We say there's no nighttime traffic restrictions along Highway 1, so aggregate could be hauled from Chilliwack and others. Aggregate could also be brought from the Pitt River, which could be delivered to the job site by a barge. There's something wrong with the PowerPoint here. No environmental impact study has been requested with respect to this project, and any claims that this is environmentally friendly is based on anecdotal evidence. It's the disruption of the sand and gravel in the first place that's the cause of the siltation. So for those reasons, we're opposed to the nighttime hauling, and we would request that in light of the ongoing problems with respect to daytime hauling, that we be permitted to meet with members of council through this committee to address the concerns not only about the variance process in this instance that was which was granted without any public consultation, but we address with council the ongoing concerns that exist and haven't been addressed with respect to daytime hauling.
That's the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reamer, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mayor Stewart. Well, I think council, and I'll just be speaking on what the decision, council approved a trial period to see what the noise is. Council also within the agreement has the ability to cancel this at any time. Some of the decisions that council looked at is also to do with the environment. If you're going to be hauling from Chilliwack to here, you're going to be disturbing somebody somewhere anywhere in the movement of gravel. You're also going to be creating a lot more greenhouse gases, was a consideration for council hauling from Chilliwack to here. So those were some of the decisions, but council in their thing had the public consultation, also wanted to see what the inconvenience would be. We've been clearly informed that Kiewit has said they're looking at 70 nights to maybe 80 nights, more like 70 over a 3-year period. So it's not 365 days a year of night hauling. We do have, and I've been on council, we have approved variances for different projects for nighttime. We've approved variances along the improvement of the Lougheed Highway just recently at nighttime. We've approved variances in different areas for night work to be done because it is a more advantageous time because of the traffic conditions at that time. And it has impacted residents in the area, this council, last council. So the approval of variances happen throughout the city due to circumstances. But we take all your concerns very seriously. Your PowerPoint presentation will be distributed to the rest of council that is not here, and they will be able to look at your issues. You can email it to all of us, the whole PowerPoint presentation. I take in your concerns, and Mayor Stewart, I should say.
My apologies. Thank you very much for coming out today. I listened to your entire presentation. One of the benefits of webcasting is that even though I was on another bunch of work, I was listening to your presentation in my office, and something struck me. You're arguing that there has been no enforcement, that we really have done a lousy job in years past of trying to regulate that. And I wonder if you could elaborate just a little bit, 30 seconds or so, on the types of things council hasn't done that the city hasn't done in trying to regulate the noise related to daytime traffic, to begin with.
Yes, well, last time we were before council, which was, my guess is about 4 years ago, one of the things that council had undertaken at that time, it was during Mayor Kingsbury's term, was that the engineering department would conduct traffic study and noise measurements at that point in time. Our understanding from the engineering department was that that wasn't done. The other thing that we had looked at was whether there was any noise remediation steps that could be taken in terms of noise barriers and walls that we know had worked in other cities, for example, in the city of Edmonton along the West Edmonton Mall corridor, 170th Street, where those had been erected, and there's baffles that are built into the walls that move the noise up instead of towards the other residents. With respect to the bylaw enforcement, the bylaw enforcement along the road is non-existent. And there's real problems with that, in particular with respect to nighttime hauling, because the bylaw officers work during the day, not in the evening. But even during the daytime, the issues that we've run into is that bylaw enforcement officers can't stop a truck that's running without tarps, because that's considered a moving infraction at that point, and they can't stop the truck. They don't have the legal authority to stop the truck. The RCMP say that it's not a criminal matter, it's not enforcement of the criminal law, and their primary job is not the enforcement of city bylaws. So we get into this debate between this bylaw enforcement officers and the RCMP as to whose responsibility it is for enforcing these bylaws. Those are the types of
No,
issues.
and I appreciate that perspective because I have actually twice in the year since I was elected mayor had people in my office discussing how we can better enforce primarily moving violations, primarily against the trucking industry, so that I think the gravel operators want to see us do a better job with the owner-operators that essentially don't tarp or whatever. And I know that while you say it's non-existent, I've been there standing beside a bylaw enforcement officer while they're enforcing it. So I want to suggest to you that this is actually an opportunity for the city to show better enforcement of our bylaws than we have in the past. And I think that I've received a commitment from the bylaw enforcement folks that we will do that they will feel empowered as well as take this as an opportunity to start doing a better job with bylaw enforcement. I'm left, though, with Councillor Asmussen's comments, for example, that the alternative really is to haul gravel from Chilliwack, which, given that we have some of the most productive gravel mining operations in the Lower Mainland, it seems really not that environmentally appropriate to be trucking this from Chilliwack. So our goal here is to try to be as responsible as we can on the noise side in mitigating that, and bluntly, if it doesn't work, to stop it right there and go ahead and haul it from Chilliwack. But there's all kinds of people in Coquitlam that will hear the trucks as they come over the Port Mann Bridge hauling from Chilliwack, and we know that we get those complaints now. So.
Well, and that's not the only time. Like, we recognize that it is a truck route, it's daytime hauling, and if they run extra loads during the daytime, that's certainly within the scope of the bylaw. And they're entitled to do that, and the city is then showing its commitment to the project by permitting that. The problem arises when it's nighttime hauling. And the fact that Councillor Asmussen says that it's 70 to 90 loads, that's not what the variation says. It's not limited to that, and the council granted a broader variance for up to 3 years.
Or up to 1 day. If they decided to break the commitment that they've made to us, then council, well, we'll cancel it in a second.
We can cancel it at any time. If they break any of the conditions, one of the things that we did say onto the issue in regards to bylaws inspectors, we've said in the meeting that we wanted our own bylaws inspectors, because Kiewit is to monitor the noise and the levels, and there's to be a week trial period. But we also said that we want our own bylaws officers out there monitoring ourselves to see what the level of noise is. And Jake brakes, I drive for a living. Jake brakes are one of your biggest noise contributors to the issue. The issue, though, is that we have a project that is a provincial project that has a time frame that requires a certain amount of gravel at certain times, and it has to be to move that gravel for certain parts that we've been informed. Now, that we have a person from Kiewit here that can maybe later explain more of this, but what's been told us, we need that nighttime stuff because we have to bring it in quickly, and that's the quickest way because they've explained to us. And I guess sometimes, nothing's perfect. We deal with issues. I mean, as Mayor Stewart pointed out, the residents in the South Slope are dealing with a lot of noise in regards to the construction of the bridge coming at them from there. There's no easy solution on a major project that we're dealing with. That's going to have a long-term benefit to everybody in the region. We don't want to see you inconvenienced, but we also want to find a way if we can make it work. If we can't make it work, we'll cancel it. That's why we have that clause in there. One councillor said, how can you make an agreement that you have a cancellation clause? Well, because we're not 100% sure if it's going to work. And that's why there's a 1-week trial period in there. And there's also the reason why if it gets abused or whatever, and we can shut it down right away. That's why we crafted it in that way. So the reason for passing it in the week for the trial is to see what the impact would be and how it can be mitigated downward.
And I guess our concern is we already know what the problems are from the daytime hauling. If the public consultation had taken place first, with the decision makers, we can tell you about the problems that, as they already exist, we've been living with them. We have nighttime hauling in the summer. They're regularly granted in the summer, so that Seaweed, for example, can do road construction when there's less congestion on the roads.
Well, like I said, that has come through council. I know we've not approved a lot of nighttime variances. Maybe I could pass through to Mr. Suzak to respond to that inquiry.
I don't know that I have the best available information, Mr. Chair, but I am aware that night hauls do occur from time to time. They are rather sporadic. I'm not aware that the city has actually denied a nighttime haul recently, and Mark Zaborniak might have better information. Mark, do you have any further comment?
Through the chair, I agree with Bill. I don't think they are fairly sporadic. I don't know the numbers. They are fairly, when they come through, they've been, fairly low numbers in terms of the number of trucks in that period, and most of them are in the summertime. What we hear from time to time from residents is that's a worse time to haul because of people having their windows open. And that was one of the things that we also added to the conditions, was not to have hauling between June 1st and September 15th. Okay, thank you. Mr. Anderson?
And which makes my point. We had these haulings through the night. We know about the noise that occurs at night, which is actually worse than the daytime because you don't have the same level of ambient noise as you do during the daytime that cuts things down. So nighttime is actually worse than the daytime. But you don't need a public study. We live with it on a daily basis. And in fact, some of the violations you can see from City Hall as the trucks roll by here without the tarps on.
Well, we've made a big, I can quite say, we made on the previous council, and we did put quite a big push on, and what we also did know is we, rather than just your issue, but we went to the pits and them and said, look, if we can't deal, we'll deal with you guys. And they came down and they hammered down on those guys that they wanted to haul out of there. So I know not this, but the last council, we did deal with that issue about uncovered tarps, because it just wasn't here. It was throughout the whole lower mainland. And for my knowledge, that's been improved, but if that's starting to happen again, we'll do another. The biggest thing is dealing directly with the pits and the truck drivers, because they can deal with it and not have those drivers come back. So if we record truck numbers and stuff like that, that's what we did the last time, because you're right, there is a bit of Ministry of Transportation and Highways are the ones that will do a vehicle safety inspection and can pull them over, have the right to ticket and do everything. But what we did before is we took down the truck plates, their names, sent them to the pits. And that worked. I thought it was working quite well, because we did really get a great deal of compliance after that. But if it's slipping, let's go back. We can do that again.
Well, we back on to Pipeline Road. We're on Kenny Street, so our backyard and our kitchen and our upstairs bedrooms back onto them. So one of the things that I'd invite council, if you're interested in partaking, we'll host an open house for council members to come and experience it firsthand during the daytime or in the evening, where you can hear the amount of noise that the trucks make. During the daytime, we bought the house knowing that it was on a truck route with regulated hours. We're not complaining about that. All we're asking is for council to abide by the bylaw that is adopted and enforce it.
Well, I thank you for your presentation. I think it's a very good presentation. And Mayor Stewart.
And I just want to echo that comment. First of all, council, I've heard from every member of council that they're concerned about this issue. But we also hear from, for example, we put out contracts for gravel supply or for the construction of a road improvement, and the only company that we will prohibit from bidding on it because the work has to be done at night is the companies here in Coquitlam. Anyone else in the Lower Mainland can bid on it, and so that's sort of it's a challenge that council has to deal with, is how do we make sure that we're being as environmentally responsible as possible at the same time as protecting you. So I'm going to take you up on your offer. First of all, I have personally reported jake brake violations and untarped loads and stuff, and I will continue to do that. And I want the city to make sure that at the end of this, you'll actually say you were less impacted during the next 3 years as you were in the previous 3 years, because we're going to be enforcing, I hope, the city, and I commit to you that the city will be out there enforcing and trying to make it so that our gravel industry abides by the rules we set.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Councillor Reamer, you have a question?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to address three things that you mentioned in your presentation. One was the noise study. My understanding is that Kiewit is conducting a noise study commencing this week. The other thing is you mentioned mitigation. And it was our intention as a council, and I believe staff had intended to bring us a report sometime in January with respect to mitigation measures. But we wanted, I believe staff probably wanted to do that after the trial period was over. We also have bylaw officers who do work at night, and I certainly hope that we can step that up with respect to the trucks, the engine brakes, and the speeding that goes on. So I'm wondering if, through the chair, I could ask Mr. Suzak to address some of those things.
Sure,
Mr. Suzak.
Sure, through the chair. I've personally learned a few things about noise and Pipeline Road and long-standing issues as a result of this issue. My understanding is that the city actually has not done noise studies, and I believe this is the first opportunity that we've taken to do so. Clearly because there is a higher impact overnight, and that noise study will be done. In terms of mitigation, we will be looking at two issues. One is the condition of the road. We don't want to create unnecessary rattling and bumps and what have you as a result of there being depressions on the road. And so we're going to take a survey of the road and see whether or not we might have to do some patching, and that will be done prior to any test haul. And of course, during a test haul, we need to continue those noise measurements and get a sense of how intense the issue is. On a longer-term basis, Mr. Zaborniak and I have been discussing this last week, and it seems to us that, and you actually alluded to it. I think you had said that the engineering department had been asked to do some work some years ago and maybe didn't get done, et cetera, et cetera. It seems, and the gravel pits are going to be there for a long time to come. Oh, yeah. There's no doubt, and people still need to live comfortable lives, and we have to find a way to balance both of those interests. It seems to us at the staff level that we have to turn our minds to perhaps a longer-term strategy regarding this issue. I don't know what that looks like at this time, but staff have been discussing the fact that the gravel pits will be there for many decades to come. People will continue to live there, and this is an issue that we need to deal with. So what we intend to do is to explore what strategies might be available to mitigate noise into the future. It will take us some months to develop that strategy, but sometime during 2010, Mr. Zaborniak and I will likely be back before committee to discuss a potential way to make noise improvements in that corridor. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Suzak. Do you have any more questions, Councillor?
No, and I too will be happy to take you up on your offer to go out there and listen to it.
If I can just clarify one thing, the noise study that Mr. Suzak was referring to, is that Kiewit's study, or is the city conducting its own study?
Through Mr. Suzak.
It is a study that is being conducted by an acoustical engineer who is employed by Kiewit. However, we have used that same acoustical engineer for our own work, and we have confidence in the independence of that body.
Yeah, I guess that raises one of the issues, because one of the residents of our association, in fact, had contracted the same company to perform noise studies at their residence. And when Kiewit went to the same company, they rejected the residents' request. And so there seems to be a bit of an issue in terms of where the loyalties lie. So I was just wondering if it was the same or different.
I think they're realizing, the company, that they're being a conflict. They're doing a study for both, right? So they have to give up one. So, but we've got your points. We're now got a half hour left for the rest of. So I thank you for your presentation. It's a very excellent presentation. You made some very good points. I think we got some things here to really reconsider and look at. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item, item 3, is our second delegation. I'd like to invite Mr. Claude Nobauer to come forward. It also concerns the approval of the variance to bylaw permitting trucks along Pipeline Road. We have a presentation associated with this as well.
Okay, Mr. Nobauer, I'm gonna have to hold you to 5 minutes because we've gone like about a half hour on the.
I'll have to deal with Mr. Anderson afterwards for taking up all my time.
That's right. So as I explained to Mr. Anderson, you have the green light there, and you have 5 minutes. I've started the clock.
Give me a second to get this on. When you get old, you can't see anymore.
Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
There we go.
Thank you very much for your time. My name is Claude Nobauer. I live at 1535 Pipeline Road. I've been on this property since the fall of 1992, and I moved to Coquitlam in May of 1981. My presentation is quite a bit different than what Sebastien did. Basically, I'm just going to take you through. I live at 1535 right across from the pits, and I want to show you what I deal with. So this is the road in front of my house. Looking north, you can see the pot lights, or you can see all the holes in the road, and you'll notice the fire hydrant there just for specific reasons. So now we're looking back at it, and you can see the same fire hydrant looking down south in front of Coquitlam Concrete at the entrance to my house and to also the house to the north of me. And you can see the ruts in the road, you can see the damage to the road. This is a better picture of all the damage, and you can see the up and down. So the problem that happens is when the trucks come up, it's not a flat road. So when the trucks come up over the hills, they have to speed up going over the hills. And when the trucks come up the road empty, you get that constant banging. And you can see well, it was raining yesterday, so you can see the lakes in the middle of the road. This is the entrance to one of the houses. I'm not sure what we can do from a mitigation standpoint. There's the road right there, and that's the driveway, right across from Coquitlam Concrete. This is looking out at Coquitlam Concrete down at those different houses and their entrances. Those are, I don't know, that's the entrance to my house. You can see, I'm not sure what we can do from a mitigation standpoint for getting preventing noise from getting into my house. This is the entrance to Coquitlam Concrete. This is the entrance to one of the other fellows, two down from my house. There's the road, and this is the entrance into his house. The sound comes right in there. It's very difficult to try and mitigate these issues. You can see here the cracked road, and looking back up north, the last entrance to the house there. You can see all the cracks in the road, the lakes all the way down. This is the hill coming up. If you look back at here, you'll notice how substantial the hill is when you're driving south, how substantial the hill is. So what happens is the trucks take a run at it to get up the hill. You can see the damage to the road looking back from the top of the hill back down toward, and you can see the Coquitlam Concrete on the left here. And you can also notice that there's absolutely no ability for us to travel walking out of this area because we don't even have, let alone not having a sidewalk, we don't even have a shoulder where we can walk out of there. It's extremely dangerous. This is at the top of the road looking south down Pipeline Road past Galette, and you can see again the damage to the road and the hill. So when the trucks come down up the road, they have to speed up to make up this hill, or they don't have to, but they do. And then the engine trucks, obviously when they're going up the hill, they make more noise. These are just a few little damages I showed you to the road. That's just in that 200-yard section. This is a Galette. This here house here is within 8 feet from the top of his 10 feet from the top of his edge of his house to the fence there, and probably another 12 feet to the road. You can see all of these houses, how close we are to the road. The other hill, here when we're driving south from Galette over toward Robson, you can see the hill that has to rise up. So at night when these trucks come down here, they race down here, pick up speed so that they can get up over these hills.
Okay, you've got a minute left.
Yeah. This is something we addressed with council a few years ago with the hillside being done. These are all the new homes, and you can see the access out onto Pipeline Road at this location here. You can see how close this road here is off of Pipeline Road, and I don't know how we can mitigate sound for these people. This house here is directly across from the old SPCA. You can see right down here how close these homes are all to the road, and the noise that we're going to have here. I got one more picture, a couple more pictures, and we're done. You can see this is coming up Pipeline Road to Robson, the hill. The hill, and the problem is that these you can see the hill here. These houses here are directly above, and as soon as they hit this location, they speed up, and the sound of the engine makes increased noise. And this is going to be between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. This is looking up further, and you can see how close these houses are to. There's nothing in between these houses and the road. That's it from my pictures. The one comment made about bringing gravel in, the one thing that hasn't been addressed or brought up by anybody is the fact that we can barge gravel in. There's a bid pit on Pitt River, just south of Swanisett, and it can be barged in, probably in quantities 10 to 50 times bigger than one truck, and brought right to the job site. That's how Lafarge bring into their ready-mix plants on Leader. That's how they bring their aggregate in. And it doesn't bother us as residents. It's certainly a possibility for this here project. I recognize it has to go ahead. I support it. I think it's going to be great for our community. But not at the cost of, like, sleep between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Do I have any questions from Selena? Mayor Stewart?
Neither of us is Selena. Yeah, I used to be Selena.
I guess the comment
You
is...
look like Selena.
we understand and concur with the potential problems at night hauling. I think, as Mr. Sebastien Anderson pointed out, everybody moved in there knowing that this is a truck route.
And I agree.
Okay, just let me, and the mitigation is a two-way street. A lot of the pictures you showed where people can put up their own houses, hedging, fencing, we see that. If you want to talk about noise mitigation, you look along different things. You take Coma Lake Avenue and Austin Avenue. Everybody in this room has gone up and down Coma Lake Avenue and Austin Avenue. We widened that to 4 lanes to move more traffic. More traffic equals more noise along those residents. You look at a lot of those residents along there, they've had to make their own noise mitigation by hedging or whatever. So when people are, and a lot of those houses are newer, when you're looking at the design, I looked in that area 20 years ago to buy property. I bought up in Burke Mountain because that was a truck route, and I stayed away from that area. So the issue, and you're correct, and we're going to look at, is the sound and the noise at night hauling. I will, though, you made one very good point, is, and I don't know if the pit has the capacity, though, but we have a gentleman from Kiewit here. Could you respond to the question of barging material and difficulties, or he mentioned on the Pitt River from, I think there's a pit there on the Pitt Meadow side.
The Pitt Meadow side, just south of Swanisett.
I know. Yeah. He's just. Thank you, Mr. Nobauer.
Good afternoon, Lauren Cayley from Kiewit Flatiron. To respond to your question regarding barging, we are barging materials for the project. It's one of a few options that we have. It is a viable option. However, for the material that we need is a sandy banked sand material from the Coquitlam pits. The material we're barging is more of a rock material from quarries such as Pitt River. And just to give you an idea of the numbers, the bank sand quantity from the Coquitlam pits probably represents about 2 to 3% of the overall quantity for the project. We're probably barging between 10 and 20% of the materials, the rock materials, for our pavement structure. So we are utilizing barging, but for specific materials.
Okay, so this one pit supplies a certain type of material and the other can supply.
That's correct.
So there's apples and oranges, they're not the same.
Right.
Okay.
But my understanding is the Pitt River pit can provide that as well, that type of aggregate.
Pitt River can provide rock materials for asphalt concrete base, but the materials that we need for surcharge and embankment, it wouldn't be cost effective to use those materials. And the quantities that we need in this case, in the range of about 70,000 cubic meters, for that small of a quantity, it doesn't make barging a viable option in our mind.
So you're saying it can be done, but it doesn't make cost-effective sense that it's done?
Cost and schedule and logistics would be difficult.
But it can be done?
I would say anything can be done, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Any other questions? I don't.
No, that was what I wanted to answer.
Okay, Mr. Nobauer?
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Mr. Gilbert, next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item concerns the Coquitlam River Watershed Strategy Grant application for Year 4 funding. The recommendation is that Council receive this report and direct staff to jointly apply with the Coquitlam First Nation in the City of Port Coquitlam for grant funding.
So moved.
Second. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Item is item 5. It concerns elementary school walkability study. It's a phase 1 update. The staff recommendation is that Council receive the report for information, that the committee receive the report for information, but and that Council direct staff to report back by mid-2010 on a summary and prioritization of a school walkability capital program for the next 5-year plan.
Thank you very much. Questions?
I'll move it.
You'll move it, seconded. Mayor Stewart. Okay.
Sir, was that?
Here.
Yep. Well, I want to thank staff for this report, this very detailed report. We, certainly as Councillor Reamer knows, Councillor Reamer was also a chair of the District Parent Advisory Council. 2 years ago when I was chair, we initiated an analysis of some of the challenges associated with why kids aren't walking to school. And this, some of the results we got back and some of the both anecdotal and data-based results showed that we need to do some work. And I applaud staff for their responsiveness on this. I think there's a tremendous volume of work. This is only part of it. I noticed that the school walkabout report that we've been shown for one school exists for all of those schools, and I'd actually like to see them all, because I've done walkabouts of several of them myself, and I know that staff have looked at it with a keener eye than mine. So my question is, how are we going to be able to prioritize this vast amount of work that clearly ought to be done, given the challenges of all the other competing interests, the sidewalks, the various paving things and such? To me, this is one of the key priorities that our city ought to be engaged in, to try to reduce the number of people that are driving their children to school when they would walk them to school if the route was safer. At least that's how they've responded in many cases to the surveys. So how do we prioritize this, and how do we get it done?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'll make a few introductory comments, and then oh, thank goodness, Paul Lee is here. The city has a sidewalk priority regime that is effectively a point system, if you will, that helps staff prioritize where to make best choices with scarce resources. However, overlaid on top of that are Council's own strategic priorities. And Council has told staff very clearly that transportation safety and initiatives surrounding schools are a priority of Council. So I think what we need to do is take a look at the mix of those two interests and try and fit as much as we can towards school, given those competing demands. If Mr. Lee has more comments, I'd welcome his perspective too.
Mr. Lee.
Through the chair, Mr. Suzak is correct. Currently, we have a sidewalk program with a very set criteria, a set of criteria that we apply through, and certainly being close to school and safety and so on are all sort of thrown into the mix. As demonstrated by this year's, or by the 2010 program, 2 of the schools' sidewalk programs been included in the 2010. They were thrown in, and obviously the need for Harborview and the other school was such that they rose up to the top of the ranking system. And so we see, even through a sort of regular ranking program, some of these schools' sidewalk needs are being addressed. But as Mr. Suzak mentioned, staff will take direction on prioritization, and we can certainly do that. The other very important thing, if I may add, is really the success of this program is through education and engagement. I think we can build sidewalks, but there has to be an engagement program, and staff is looking at these things for next year. And but certainly with sidewalks, it would help.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mayor Stewart, that's it. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I certainly support this. I think it's great that we're increasing safety for students going to and from school. Just wondering with respect to elementary and middle, whether we gave any consideration to our middle schools. And I only say that because kids in elementaries now are K to 5, of course, and you do have a lot of parents who drive their students during those years, whereas I think you might tend to see more students walking at the middle school level. So I'm just wondering what sort of consideration was placed around that.
True too.
You've answered part of it. I mean, especially for a school like Harborview, where the need was obvious. But if you could just address the larger question, that would be great. Mr.
Lee?
Through the chair, staff at this point has not formulated a program to do middle school. Our discussion with some of the people that are really the specialists in motivating and getting kids to walk to school indicated that for middle school, it's not so much as infrastructure and sidewalks and so on, but it's engagement and commitment, and it's lower cost. We're not spending a lot of money building sidewalks and curbing and so on, but at a very low cost, it can be very effective to motivate middle school. It's bringing the awareness of the benefit of walking to school.
Okay, at an early age.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? Okay. I think it's a good report. It's a step in the right direction. School boards have been doing a lot of things to encourage walking, the walking bus program and different things. I live just right close to an elementary school, and I will agree with Councillor Reamer's comments. Parents, I would say about 90% drive their kids to school, then they're only a block away, some of them. And they have good sidewalks in our area, in some of these areas, to walk to that school. So there's got to be an attitude change. I think us making some improvements to sidewalks around schools is beneficial just not for the schools, but for all those communities involved. I do like your report because I think you pointed out that there's a multifaceted responsibility going on here. We're going to do our part, but I can tell you, take Rochester Elementary, and you pointed out some of the parking problems, people parking at crosswalks that I see by Lee Elementary, right up to either side or in the crosswalk where you can't see. I've also, when you come off Rochester onto Schoolhouse on a bus, you can't get into the bus stop because the parents have all parked in the bus stop, and you can't even barely get because of the improper parking. So the parents and the people that belong to the school have to start taking more responsibility about making their school safe, especially at those times of morning and afternoon, and helping us with this issue. Questions I have, we dealt with this through the school board. Is this going to go back to our joint meeting with the school board, Mr. Dumont? Will this be an item to be discussed, or has this already been dealt through the school board?
I'm not sure if it's on the agenda or not, but we can certainly put it on if that's the request of the committee. I
know we've dealt with the school board on this prior to it. I just didn't know if there's any. Mayor Stewart, you have a comment?
Well, I'd say, because there are two sides to this. There's the traffic safety on city property, the traffic safety related to the roadway, and of course this traffic safety on school property. And we have to work with the school board related to both of them. But there's no question that the school board has its own challenges, and it knows of them. That in many cases the traffic challenges in the drop-off area or in some other aspect of the issue that is entirely on school property. So we have to open the doors to dialogue.
So do you think this should be on the agenda for
Yes,
that?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. The other question I had came up to me was curb construction standards. There are some newer standards out there. Are we using those newer standards within this study, or are we still using the same older type of standards in the curbs?
Through the chair, we want to use something called a temporary curbing to check out the effectiveness if we're going to do curbing and so on for channelization. These are the rubberized temporary that you put on the pavement, and it would allow us to adjust, extending it, widening it, or shortening it. So we intend to do that first before we spend the money to put in real curb. But it'll be no different than city standards, the curb and gutter with a gutter and a barrier face of 6 inches. That's how we intend to use them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lee. I have no other comments. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
That is the final item on the agenda this afternoon.